Hello again, folks. On a couple of minutes early here. So we will give it a couple of minutes for everybody to join us at 6 p.m. Pacific or on the hour, wherever it is that you are, around our beautiful pale blue dot. I'm Mat Kaplan, the Senior Communications Advisor for the Planetary Society. And we're very happy to have you joining us this evening. Just another minute or so to go here. I may mention it again. I don't think I've ever worn a T-shirt for a live Planetary Society event, but I am tonight. I was wearing this early because our leader, Chief Operating Officer Jennifer Vaughn, I told her that I still have my 20th anniversary Planetary Society T-shirt 25 years ago, and so I put it on and sent her a picture of the logo because we're preparing our 45th anniversary logo because we are just about to begin that celebration. And that's all thanks to you members who make it all possible and have right from the start 45 years ago when our three founders, it was 45 years ago last week that they began the process of creating the society. So welcome. And I do see that our special guest for tonight has joined us. So I'm going to invite Asa Stahl in as a speaker. Asa, you should be able to hop in now at any point. And when Asa pops in here, it'll probably be just about 6 o'clock, and we'll get this show on the road. Hello, Asa.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. Welcome to, as I understand it, your very first live stream in our member community.
That's absolutely right. Thanks for having me.
You are hardly new to the community, though, because that's one of the reasons we wanted to get you in here tonight for what we are including within that series that we ambiguously call Planetary People. It's not just to talk about your brand new course that is available to our members here in the community, Stargazing 101, but to hear a little bit more about you. And so I'm looking forward to that as well. And as far as I know, you are still the newest newbie staff. Am I missing somebody? I hope not.
No, yeah, it's been almost a year now, and I'm still the newest. And it still does feel that way. It feels like I started just yesterday. Time.
That's good.
Totally flown. Yeah.
Time flies, when you're having fun. It has been fun. I mean, one of the things I hope we can talk about is why you came to us as a part of, well, complementing the fact that we are so happy to have you on board as a colleague. So we are past 6 o'clock now. I just want to once again welcome everybody as you drop into this live stream within Planetary People. I'm Mat Kaplan, the Senior Communications Advisor for the Planetary Society. For a little bit more than 20 years, the host of Planetary Radio. And very glad to be joining you here again this evening in the community. One of these live streams that we do for you folks, and so that you can participate. And if you are not joining us live, if you're a member joining us after the fact, we thank you as well. If you're not even a member of the Planetary Society, maybe you just found this on our website or on our YouTube channel. Well, we would love to have you join the family, become a member of the society, and have access to the member community, which includes these great live events and the online courses, which are now largely the responsibility of our guest, Dr. Asa Stahl. So with that, and as people continue to drop in, Asa, I guess we'll get underway. Can we talk a little bit about you to start things off?
Absolutely.
I took this bio, and I'm only using pieces of it right out of your profile page on the Planetary Society website at planetary.org. You can look him up there. Dr. Asa Stahl is an astrophysicist, award-winning children's book author, and science communicator. During his PhD at Rice University, Asa worked to discover newborn planets around other stars in order to help clarify how worlds, including our own, come to be. So you're an exoplanet guy.
I am an exoplanet guy. Yeah, I've been for years.
I saw on your website, which, I'll try right now to drop your own website into the chat. And it's a little difficult to keep all these plates spinning, everybody. So bear with me. I'm going to try and bring that up. And instead of copying it, I actually opened your website. I hope that doesn't mess up anything else here.
I could always use an extra visitor or two. That's fine.
Well, you just got one. And there's Ace's website, which I do encourage you to look at if you really want to dig into more of his background. I read on the website, and I assume this is still true, that some of the work that you did, some of the techniques that you were working on, which I guess were spectrometry based, are in use by other exoplanet researchers?
Yeah, so a lot of my PhD was dedicated to developing essentially software pipelines, which doesn't sound, the hottest, but in astronomy, a lot of what you're doing is just analyzing data from telescopes. And so we had data from a bunch of different telescopes, and one that was particularly potentially useful for finding newborn planets around very young stars, which are great windows if you can find them into these planet formation processes that are pretty poorly understood still. And so these software pipelines, oh, now I'm seeing it in the chat. Wow, that's a long delay.
I thought I never pressed send.
Okay.
So now I have. Sorry about that.
No. But yeah, so these software pipelines were to get radial velocity measurements from the not raw, but other data that you could automatically get reduced from other pipelines. So essentially I was doing all the work so that you didn't have to. What took years to, crunch these numbers down into just one single data point for any given observation, you could do automatically if you're another scientist. And so we then were reached out to by another research group who had data on what could have been a star or a planet orbiting another star. And they were able to use our pipeline with our help to discover that this was truly a planet and not a star. And this was a planet that was, if I recall correctly, it's been a few years, only about 11.5 million years old, which compare that to the Earth, which is 4.5 billion years old.
A newborn.
Yeah, it's exactly. If the sun were, a middle-aged person, then this planet would be, a couple weeks old. So that was extremely exciting, and it was very gratifying, to see that that work was being also picked up by other people. Though also, my research collaboration is ongoing. Since I've left, other graduate students are using that same data analysis stuff that I was working on and those results to hopefully, find a planet soon.
That's where it has to be very gratifying. And I hope everybody noticed that great science communicator analogy or metaphor that you came up with there. If our sun is middle-aged, then this is indeed a newborn world, because that's kind of what you do for us. But I'm not done with the other stuff from that other professional career that you have. I saw on the website there were 2 papers in the Astrophysical Journal that you were lead author for, and several others where you were listed among the authors. But I love the title of one of them. Where is it here? Here it is. This is just the subtitle. DI Tau A and B, Orbit Characterization and Physical Properties Determination, which is fine. That sounds like a science journal topic. But the main topic, that was the subtopic. The subtopic is the giveaway to Asa. The main title was Star-Crossed Lovers.
Wow. Well, I hate to burst your bubble, Matt, but that was actually a co-author who came up with that. A good friend of mine, Xian Tang.
Okay, but it was your call, right, as a lead author? Okay.
But yes, that one was not about planet detection. That was a binary star system that it was actually really cool. I know that this is something that gets brought up in the Planetary Society every now and then. That we're into history here, and archaeoastronomy, besides being a great word with lots of vowels, is really cool that we have these stellar systems out there that are operating on time scales that, can kind of duck in and out of our own lives in weird ways that sort of put things in perspective. So, for example, a lot of the data from my PhD was taken, I would be playing with this, observation of a star and think, I was 10 when this was taken or something. And then this paper was about the fact that the star had been observed back in the 80s, 90s, and people thought they saw hints of another star orbiting it. And then it kept on being observed every few years for decades, and the star seemed to go away. And finally, we observed it. We actually saw evidence of the star. We could put this all into a coherent picture of the star's orbit being closer or farther, or its position, its orbit being closer or farther, and making it easier or harder to see. But it was crazy to think about that. We were part of this sort of 40-year, 50-year long story of other astronomers trying to figure out what was going on with the system. And this whole time, these stars are just traveling around each other and changing what we can see from Earth. And then in the end, you can put it into a complete picture. But so yeah, it was star-crossed lovers, I guess.
And when you you could talk about a star being 10 or 11 million years old, being a newborn, it kind of predates human history, even humanity itself, by at least a couple of orders of magnitude, I think. But it's amazing to think what has happened within our lifetimes, and especially my lifetime. I mean, I've told this story before, that when I was a kid and was devouring astronomy and space books, they all said, we will probably never see a star as any more than a point of light. And
Wow.
we'll probably never be able to tell if they have their own planets. And my God, what a change we have seen in a lot less time than, back when I was reading those books. It really is, it's such an exciting time to be studying the cosmos.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why I got into exoplanets specifically, was because around the time that Kepler was making Kepler spacecraft, not the astronomer, around the time that the Kepler spacecraft was discovering, its first several hundreds of exoplanets, I was an undergraduate, and I was just beginning to decide, should I go into particle physics or cosmology or something else? And there was just something so narratively compelling about exoplanets, and it's what kind of, I mean, it's not the only thing, but it's one of many things that I think makes me and the Planetary Society well suited for each other, is that each world, whether we can see it as something we up close that we can send rovers to, or just a completely distant pixel, where we see little dips in brightness or something and infer the presence of a planet. Regardless of that, you can imagine so much. There's a whole story that each of these planetary systems could tell if we only knew each of these worlds. And I loved thinking about that. And the idea of being able to discover one of those was, pretty entrancing for a 19-year-old.
Totally get that. And you're not the first scientist that I've talked to who reached that crossroads or split in the road, between, gee, do I want to study the infinitesimal or the infinite? And we tend to talk to the people who take the second road there at the Planetary Society.
Really? That's interesting. I've never, because that's how I was. That was literally the decision I was thinking about, was, should I be a theoretical particle physicist or a theoretical cosmologist? I want the biggest ultimate scales or the smallest fundamental scales. I didn't know anyone else. I haven't met anyone else who's thought about it that way when they were making that career decision. So that's
I've only, it's maybe a couple of others. I'm not saying it's like a mass, but who knows? Maybe we'll hear from everybody now who says that that's why they went in that direction. But I mean, obviously through all of this, there was this interest in sharing what, as we all know, the boss Bill Nye calls the PB&J, the passion, beauty, and joy. That was always with you, because you started. I mean, I guess you never. Which came first, being a scientist or sharing your love of science, is a better way to put it?
I think that they developed at the same time.
As I suspected.
I you know everything about me now. They both, yeah, I think essentially started in graduate school. That was when I was really beginning to do substantive research and science communication. And I was pretty sure I wanted to be a science communicator, especially of astronomy and maybe physics, by the time I was leaving undergrad. But I figured I had to, at the very least, try graduate school, try being the one to make the discoveries before I go dedicating my life to communicating them, because otherwise I figured I would always wonder whether I wanted to be the one, on the other side of the interview. And over the course of, basically by the time I was halfway through my PhD, I was pretty sure, okay, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to just, learn and share. But I was still, glad to finish the PhD, and it was a great time.
There are some great lines in this article, an opinion piece that you wrote for the American Physical Society. It was in 2023, and I'll just take one little piece of it. In fact, I will try here if I can do it right. Hang on. I'm going to try to share this hyperlink, and I will post it as well. Rhiannon, stick around. I'm going to try to embarrass you in a couple of minutes here. But here is another great one from, if you want to read the whole article, then I'm just going to read one line from an article, this opinion piece that Asa wrote in 2023. And it was called, the articles, you titled it, Taking the Childlike Out of Childlike Wonder. And your theme, I guess, was adults should be able to feel all of this sense of wonder as well. So here's the quote: "Those gaps in knowledge let wonder into our lives. The more we can outline the frontiers of scientific understanding to the public, the better chance we have of connecting them with what we care about," speaking to other scientists, "and of closing the gap between scientists and lay people." Do you still consider that one of your primary goals?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's all about sharing the wonder. And I think this is a question. I should ask you this too, Matt. I know that you're the one interviewing me, but
no, you can't no turning the tip now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Some other time. But something I ask a lot of people in my life is, if you could sum up what you want to do with your life in one verb, what would it be? And by that I mean, this is the thing that you need to be doing to be happy. And there's obviously many things that you need to be doing in general to be happy, but this is common to all. You can imagine, thousands of different lives you could live where you'd be happy, but this is in all of them. So you're doing this in all of them. And if you're not doing this, no matter what, you're not going to be happy. And so, a friend of mine who's a therapist said help. A friend of mine who's an artist said create. And mine used to be discover, when I thought that's what I wanted to do. But now I think it's share.
That's it.
And
when you asked the question, that was the word that immediately came up for me. Same word. So we share that.
And that's incredible, because when I first got to TPS, when I first went down to Pasadena after being taken on board, and I was meeting all the staff in person for the first time, especially the comms team, I asked everyone else that question. And I can't remember exactly, but almost everyone said share. It was pretty crazy. That's not a common word, but us science communicators, we want to learn new things. We want to feel that sense of awe at the universe and knowledge. But then we don't want to just, be stuck in a library. We want to talk about it with others. We want to share it. And to also just share experiences more broadly than that. But yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing that really speaks to the culture here, and the culture of our whole community.
Amen to that, brother. You're right. And I'm not a bit surprised that so many of our colleagues said the same thing. It certainly has been true for me, even before my Planetary Society days. You've done it with kids, too. I would hold up a copy of one of your wonderful books, the Big Bang book, because I bought it. But of course, I gave it to my grandson, my 8-year-old grandson, who loved it, absolutely devoured it. He read it as soon as I handed it to him. So I can't hold it up anymore. But I mean,
It's
that
right
was
there.
there it is, of course, right above his shoulder. There it is. And is that the other one next to it, the newer book? What's it called?
Yes, Picnic Planet, a lunchtime
Picnic Planet.
guide to
Yeah.
or what is it? A lunchtime guide to your galaxy's exoplanets.
I'm looking now at the title, which I did put in my notes. I haven't seen it, but the Big Bang book, I'm not the only one who thought it was excellent. Sakura Medal finalist, NSTA, National Science Teachers Association -CBC Outstanding Science Trade Book, ILA, International Library Association. Wow. Nonfiction honor book, and an Ezra Jack Keats Award nominee. Not bad, not bad. I do recommend it. And if you want to find out about his books, go to the website that I put the URL up. It's there in the chat. Just scroll up a little bit and you'll find it. Great stuff. Absolutely great stuff. So how did you find out we had an opening at the Planetary Society?
It was complete chance. I hate to say it, maybe the comms team really needed me because I had never heard of the Planetary Society beforehand.
Really? No kidding.
No.
That's too true of too many people, unfortunately. But I know everyone watching this is sharing widely about your beloved society. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I wish we had more of a bandwidth to do, and hopefully we can do it more in the future. But just getting our brand out, our name out more among universities, especially among graduate students, astronomy departments, stuff like that. Because if that had happened, I would definitely have been interested. But yeah, I just never heard of it. So, I finished my PhD about a year and a half ago or so, and then took a little bit of a break just to relax and decompress, and then start looking for jobs, and just stumbled on it online. And
wow.
Yeah, it just seemed like a perfect fit.
Lucky for us. I said that already, but it bears repeating. Is it what you expected? I mean, you already said that you made the rounds when you came down for the first time. And we should say you're a Bay Area guy, San Francisco Bay Area guy, born and raised, apparently, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Since you came to it fairly cold, I'm sure you did a ton of research once you decided you might go for this position. I mean, what were your impressions when you started to learn more about us from the inside?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, the one thing you can't tell as easily from just, looking us up on Wikipedia is the actual culture of what it's like to work here and to, talk with the people who work here. And, that is what hooked me in. I could have had that first interview and then thought, oh, these people are jerks, I'm leaving right now. I don't care what they do. But every interview that I had, and I think that this was felt both ways, it just was more and more exciting at how good of a cultural fit it was. That everyone here is so positive and affirming, and but also like really, really smart and competent, good at what they do. It's a pretty seamless organization. Everyone fits together really well, and yeah, I think we all also have that. We're all united by that same PB&J, and that core need, that desire to share, and so we're all really happy to do it. So it's a pretty happy workplace too.
It really is.
Pretty contagious.
I have worked for many, many organizations, private sector and public, and there really is nothing like the community of staff, of family of staff members that we have now. Wasn't always this way. It was quite different when I first arrived, and there were ups and downs following that 25 years ago. But really, as Bill Nye also says, we are probably the best off we have ever been, and you certainly fit in beautifully and fill an important role for us. I mean, how would you describe your job, which has the title science editor?
I usually describe it as sort of tripartite thing where I'm writing articles, I'm writing these courses, and then I'm writing and hosting videos that go on, our Instagram and TikTok and other, social media channels like that. So it's a nice mixture of, these sort of like more long form researched, maybe interview based deep dives, and then these, random but still educational videos that are, extremely short, like less than a minute, but then could potentially reach a completely different audience. And then these courses, which, are for our members, and they're much more, practically driven, and I think are, the deepest of dives, right?
And we should say, I mean, yeah, you are now hosting. You're the host of the one we're going to be talking about in depth within moments here. But there are other great people involved. I mean, I want to mention our wonderful colleague, Merk Boyan, our video guy, who is just a creative genius. And some of the shorter things you do, you've been working with Amber Trujillo, right? Who, among other things, runs this member community.
Absolutely. It's pretty ridiculous how talented they both are. Amber just has, like, it seems like a preternatural sixth sense to me of how social media should work, how to communicate via video in these ways. And then Merk, it's crazy how much Merk does. It took me months to appreciate, for all those, listening on or watching the stream, every single piece of visual content you see the Planetary Society put out, anything that's edited at all, any infographic, anything, he does. It's crazy. That's so much for one person to do, and he's so good at it. So yeah, extremely lucky, and he's done a fantastic job with the courses.
And Merk, I'm sure the check's in the mail. So no, he is all of that, and just a very funny guy as well. He brings has brought wonderful humor to a lot of the work that he has done with a lot of our other colleagues, Bill Nye, Bruce Betts. It's another guy that we're very lucky to have. And Amber, everybody here in the community knows how great she is. So let's start easing into talking about the course, Stargazing 101. To do that, I want to do something, and I had to jump through hoops to do this. So it turns out that our member community from the company Mighty Networks doesn't like to play, it'll play videos, but it doesn't like to play them with audio. So I wanted to share, I mean, I'm hoping a lot of you out there have already completed the course, or maybe you're in the midst of it. I did. I think it's outstanding, especially for the beginners out there who are intimidated by this whole topic. I wouldn't call myself a beginner. I'm barely intermediate, I would say, after all the years but I got my first telescope when I was 10. I still don't call myself an amateur astronomer, but I just thought it was beautifully put together. And of course, within the 4 scenarios that you have broken the course up into, there are here and there these videos that you present to us. And I'm going to try now to share my screen, and this is going to take a minute or two, to share from YouTube, because it was the only way I was going to be able to play this. And you guys out there, let us know if this is working. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave it pretty much like that. But here goes.
And seeing the wonders.
Let's actually play it from the start. How about that, Matthew?
There are many different ways to fall in love with space, but there's perhaps none more treasured than seeing the wonders of the night sky. Stargazing fundamentally changes our perspective. The sky transforms from a flat ceiling to a starscape with depth. And as the universe beyond our planet begins to feel more real, it shifts the way we think. We feel awe, humility, appreciation, wonder. We reconsider what the cosmos is and what it means to live within it. We realize that the mind-boggling scales and intriguing mysteries of astronomy are real, that all the things it describes, galaxies, black holes, supernova, are actually out there in the same place as us. We feel like part of the universe. We feel it in our bones. Carl Sagan once said, "When you're in love, you want to tell the world." That is part of what we do as members of the Planetary Society. share our love of space with others. And this course is a how-to guide for those who want to do just that through stargazing. We'll cover how you can learn about, navigate, and explain the night sky. We'll provide you with practical tips from professional astronomy communicators. Everything from how to plan a star party to fielding tricky cosmology questions. By the time you finish, you'll be able to help others stargaze in a way that broadens their perspective, encourages their curiosity, and spreads that love of space we all share.
Oh, we can't hear you, Matt. At least I can't.
How about now?
That's better.
Sorry, I had to switch the audio back too. Well done. Bravo. That is just such a beautiful opening. That's the first thing you see when you begin the course, Stargazing 101, which we were calling internally for a long time backyard astronomy. But I think Stargazing 101 is a great way to put it as well. What was the goal? What were you and the rest of us hoping to accomplish with this?
Well, I think, broadly speaking, the same thing that we're hoping to accomplish with a lot of our courses, which is, to provide this valuable service to members that, for those who want to take this deeper dive, whether they're beginners or, older timers, to be able to, get better trained in either the space science or the ability to share that space science for the same sort of model that we have with the Space Advocacy 101 course. That if you're a member of the Planetary Society, presumably that's something you care about, just as presumably the search for life or stargazing is something you care about. So what tools can we provide people? That's kind of the way we're thinking about it, is that this community is also a way for us to provide tools to our members, and hopefully a good one.
I'm watching the praise coming in from the people who've already done the course. From our members out there, I'm seeing what you guys are posting in the chat, at least some of it, and it really is making an impression. And I think exactly the one that Asa, you and our leadership were hoping to achieve. There is one person who has joined us, and apparently it is at 2:30 in the morning where she is in the UK. Rhiannon, I don't know if you know this, but your post earlier today, by coincidence, popped up and was shared by Amber in our internal community among the staff. And we were all so touched by it, as I put in my response to you. And Rhiannon, you're totally anonymous, other than your first name now. And you're in the UK, so you can't be too hard to find. Let me read just a little bit of Rhiannon said, and this was after the starting the course. If you told me an hour ago that I'd be sitting here crying while looking at the stars, I'd have laughed. But here I am crying. Not only that, but I've identified, crying looking at the stars. Not only that, but I've identified my second ever constellation, and the stars I'm looking up at make the tail of Ursa Major, and I can even see the body of it without my scope. I've always loved the stars, but being able to see them so clearly and be able to pinpoint them with knowledge I've learned from all of you makes me love them a whole lot more and really appreciate their beauty. That's only part of what Rihanna posted. Okay, that really must be gratifying, hearing that kind of report.
I mean, yeah, it's completely beautiful. Yeah, that's so lovely. And yeah, I mean, what more could anyone want from anything that they've written? Yeah, Rhiannon, I hope that you have lots of clear skies ahead and see even more amazing things.
So the idea of the course is it's not just to interest people on their own in becoming aware of and appreciating the cosmos at a new depth. It's encouraging them to share it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like we were saying before, just as all of the staff, the team of TPS is kind of united by this desire to share. We understand that so many members of our community are in love with space and want to tell the world. And maybe that's at Thanksgiving coming up. You break out your telescope, even though it's way too cold outside or maybe cloudy.
Yes, right.
And Or maybe it's just, walking with a friend, through a city and you happen to see Jupiter. I mean, that's, the way that I share stargazing by far the most with people is, I was in New York City last week and I was walking down the street at like 10 p.m. with a couple of friends and I pointed out Jupiter and they went, "What? You can see Jupiter from New York City?" It's like, yes, you can, but, you just have to know the look. You have to look up. So giving people who want to the tools to share that love. And I think more than anything, just that perspective that the sky is always up there and there's always stuff up there that's worth seeing and that can connect you with this broader universe. You just have to be willing to let it in.
And that's where the course starts. For people who may not have binoculars, much less a telescope, because you can appreciate the sky. Obviously, it's better if you're in a nice, isolated, dark sky area. But even in an urban place like you are, like I am, there are things like the big planets, like Jupiter. I pointed out Saturn to some people just the other day, and certainly our moon. I mean, that's obviously where you begin.
Yeah. I mean, when I show people the planets and the moon, just from San Francisco, from my roof with this telescope, I'm always surprised. I don't know why I'm always surprised, but I'm always surprised. Sometimes the moon gets a much bigger reaction than Saturn. For me, it was Saturn, right?
Me too.
That's the classic, right?
Yeah.
But I think just because the moon is so taken for granted, and it's just this kind of blobby white thing with splotches on it or whatever, and then people, look at it through a telescope who maybe even really haven't seen images of what it looks like in detail online, and they realize, oh my God, there's all this texture. There's mountains and and craters and rays and different terrain, and it just kind of blows their mind. And it always surprises me, but in a great way. And so I mean, the easiest to see stuff is not by any means the least cool. It's often the most cool for a lot of reasons.
I was 10 when I first saw Saturn's rings. You'd think that maybe I'd seen it through the Griffith Observatory telescope, but I guess when I was a little kid, I wasn't there on the right nights. So it wasn't until my parents got me my first telescope, which was of the type that you later in the course call a hobby killer, and thank God it didn't kill me. I mean, this is not too far from what it was, longer tube. This is actually not a terrible National Geographic refractor scope, but it was when I looked through that first scope and saw the rings, and it took my breath away, and it still does. There's just something about those photons, knowing those photons have come directly from across the solar system, starting at the sun and then bouncing off of the rings and then coming right back into your eye. It's just hard to imagine anything more exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty breathtaking.
Where were you when you first saw Saturn's rings outside of photos in a book?
I think that people would be surprised to know that I was 22.
Wow.
I was already in my PhD before I had even seen the rings of Saturn, which I know is criminal, but also goes to show you how hard it can be, how inaccessible telescopes are to so many people, that even me, who had such interest, it was not an easy connection to make. And so I only looked through a telescope at Saturn's rings for the first time when I volunteered to help my advisor out with the telescopes that Rice University owned at open houses to look at things like moon and the moon and Saturn. And I just didn't tell him, because I didn't want to be I didn't want to be this kind of come off as this inexpert fool that I didn't want to come off with like a country rube coming in here. I'd never seen Saturn before. so everyone else is, I let all these people go first, and I show them whatever, and then I just kind of take this glimpse in between. And I'm sure that some people, just thought I was this huge nerd for being as amazed as I was for someone who must have seen this dozens of times before, but it was my first time, and I went back and, saw it as many times as I could between other people. So yeah, and I kind of went through a crash course in this sort of thing. I mean, it wasn't, maybe a year or two between that first glimpse and looking through a 107-inch telescope at McDonald Observatory.
Oh yeah, I've been to McDonald. Didn't use that telescope, but I was there during one of their sky parties and saw some great stuff.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful observatory. Great staff, super friendly. I highly recommend if any of our members are in the Texas area or ever going to drive through the middle of nowhere in West Texas.
Yep. Beautiful country, beautiful countryside.
Totally.
And boy, do they put on a good astronomy star party.
Yeah. But so yeah, I went through a little bit of an unusual path, I would say, in observational astronomy.
Clearly, though, now, I mean, I'm looking at that. What is it, an 8-inch or 6-inch celestron over your shoulder? 6? Yeah. I have an 8, so there. But it's also, but mine is like 25 or 30 years old. I mean, I have 3 decent telescopes. I have a little Bosch and Lohm 4-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain that I got on my honeymoon in New York at one of the stores in New York City. And then I have my go-to Celestron like yours, very much like yours. And then my treasure is a 12-inch Dobsonian, which I got because of the passing of a wonderful, wonderful friend of mine. And I bought it from his daughter after he passed away. And it sits in the garage, and it's just so meaningful to me. Each one of these scopes has stories behind them that I just absolutely love, that makes the experience of using them even richer. And I don't know. I don't know if you could say that about your scope, but maybe when you've had it for 25 years.
Yeah, I think it's too new, unfortunately. I mean, I've already, gotten some great memories with it, but I think it's more of the places you'll go type story where, the sort of reasoning behind me getting this telescope in particular, as opposed to say the 8-inch, was that this was the largest telescope that I think I could get, that I could essentially carry with me portably. That I can fit this and its various accessories down into a duffel bag and a backpack, and can hike with them a short distance, like up the top of a hill or something. I can put in my car easily. I have a tiny car, and go on adventures with them. But oh man, I would love, maybe one day I'll have a house in the garage or live out in the middle of nowhere, and I'll have a 12-inch Dobsonian. That would be incredible.
Yep. We're getting ahead of ourselves because telescopes don't come up in the course until quite a bit later. But there's stuff I was learning in each one of the scenarios, and I'm supposed to know most of this stuff. I think I did know that the oldest constellations go back about 5,000 years to Mesopotamia. Sure seems to say a lot, doesn't it, about how we've tried to find order and meaning and beauty in the night sky for probably the entire history of humanity, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of my favorite parts of researching this course. There were a lot of more practical tips, which are fairly easy to find, I think, but that sort of anthropology of it, the archaeoastronomy, that history, it's a relatively new field. But yeah, I read some very cool papers about ancient sky cultures and what's common to all the different cultures throughout civilization and history, what's separate, how they're related to one another. For example, if I have this correctly, the Sami sky culture, like how they define constellations, the Sami, or indigenous tribe in Finland, is essentially a completely distinct. It's like the most distinct. If you mapped out, say China's constellations to Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, or whatever, they all, form different groups, but they have links with one another in some way. The Sami are completely off on their own in a little island. It's super interesting. Whereas something like the Polynesian constellations are almost like this perfect common ground between almost every other sky culture, potentially because theirs were so based on navigation, so centered on that. So depending on what you were using constellations for, to tell stories, to navigate, to divine the future, the actual shapes and positions and all that sort of stuff would be different. And so we kind of, project ourselves and our societies onto the sky, but then also kind of comes back on us. So there's a lot of cool work that's being done in that, and I could have written a whole other course on that, but unfortunately, we're only able to do a little bit there.
But I think in the space that was appropriate for this course, it was really fascinating to read about how different cultures approached the sky and had much in common, but also had some differences. I mean, and there were things I learned. I mean, speaking of navigation, I had no idea that, as you said, the first star in Orion's belt will rise and set at almost exactly due east and due west. I don't know how I got as far as I did without knowing that, because I love looking at Orion in the wintertime.
Yeah. A lot of those sorts of tips were also new to me. And for example, the Southern Night Sky navigation tips, those are all Asa Stahl originals, pretty much, almost all of them. I don't know, if we have any members in this event right now or living in the Southern Hemisphere, but I feel for you if so, because at least from what I could see, there were very few resources for navigating the Southern Night Sky. And so I did my own homework and sort of designed my own way of going around and navigating from constellation to constellation and star hopping. Because it's a beautiful night sky. You get to see the Magellanic Clouds. So cool.
You clearly did try to give at least, if not equal time, an attempt at it to those of our members who are in the Southern Hemisphere or anybody else who's watching right now. And I should say, the greatest night sky that I ever saw was from the Atacama Desert in Chile, and looking up at the Southern Crux, and actually seeing those Magellanic Clouds was just awe-inspiring on an incredibly dark night. But the sky is there for all of us. Speaking of which, there are some really wonderful star charts. A lot of the illustrations in the course, you properly credited a whole bunch of other great folks and organizations, but there were some star charts that I wondered how those were created.
Oh, well, so you're talking about the arrows pointing for mapping from one constellation to the next?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that's right. So those were, one of them was based off of another image, and then Merck, we added to it and subtracted to it. Both designed by Merck, as always, Merck Boyan, our amazing visual storyteller. And then the second one, the Southern Night Sky one, almost all of those directions for getting around that sky. Yeah, I just looked at the maps of the night sky and thought for a really long time and said, okay, this is how you could do it. But yeah, it was a team effort between me and Merck.
Yeah, it worked very well. They're very nicely done. There is some discussion now. People are talking about their telescopes. Bob Ware asked, jumping back a topic, did some of these societies make note of the North Star of Polaris?
Absolutely.
Which wasn't always the North Star, but certainly has been for all of recorded human history.
Yeah, and it's oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. That's all right. Whatever you wanted to say.
Oh, just that something that another thing that I learned in researching the course was, from my Northern Hemisphere bias self, is that there isn't the same sort of equivalent to the North Star in the Southern Hemisphere, that we happen to have this very handy dandy bright star pretty much exactly where the North Pole is. But the Southern Hemisphere, there is a star there that you can use, but it's not the brightest. And so you kind of have to think, okay, it's near that bright star, unless you have a very dark sky and could see that dimmer star, which I believe is called Sigma Octantis. So just another fun tidbit. But what were you going to say?
Only to go on to, because I see that there is some discussion about astronomy software, apps that people can get, which you address in the course. You recommended Stellarium Mobile and Sky Safari 7 Plus, but it sounds like that you think the free version of Stellarium is a good place to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's so I use both of those apps depending on what I'm trying to do. And I think Stellarium is just the easiest to use, has a fantastic user interface. The fact that's free, if you don't have to feel like you're investing in anything, just try it out. I think that there are other apps that are, pretty good too, but none of them feel as clean and easy to me. It's very customizable. And yeah, if you can just kind of open it up and point and move your phone around, and it'll show you exactly what you're looking at. And then also something that was important to me as I was sort of reviewing these is what information could you get on these objects. If I click on a random star, what does it tell me, and is it accurate, is it up to date? And some of those apps, it's less so the case, but if I remember correctly, Stellarium just pulls from Wikipedia, which is pretty good, which is better than what, it makes sense, right? That compared to like an entire encyclopedia that an app has to create otherwise. It's not easy.
Yeah, sure. Still impressive.
Yeah. Whereas I think Sky Safari has its own native encyclopedia, which is just quite good and accurate. But I think the way I would break it down is, if you are getting really serious with stargazing, and you want to plan out your stargazing nights, or if you have a telescope and you want to control it via an app, then Sky Safari is a great way to go. Or if you're trying to do astrophotography. But if you're just trying to ease into it, then Stellarium free, great way to go.
I'm seeing a lot of talk about Skyview, Sky Safari as well, but Rhiannon said as good as Skyview is, it definitely took a bit of getting used to. She said there are a lot out there. I think I've got 3 apps on my phone. Stellarium is one of them, and I agree with you. I think it's absolutely great. I had never seen or even heard of a Bortle scale map before I took the course. I knew, that there were ratings of, how good an area was for observing. First thing I did was check out the 2 locations where I enjoyed the darkest skies in my life. One of them sort of northwest of Roswell, New Mexico. No, I didn't see any saucers. But as I mentioned, definitely Chile's Atacama, because we were so lucky. I was down there because of some stuff happening at the ALMA Observatory. It was sort of the public unveiling of the ALMA array. And it was the darkest I've ever seen. You could not see your hand in front of your face, no moon. And it was just a gorgeous sky. And not surprisingly, the Bortle map that you have in the course showed these as, those are good places to go. But we're not all that lucky, right? Everybody should hope to plan a vacation in a dark sky area. And hopefully you've got some near you folks. But you can do some pretty good observing, as we were hinting at earlier in this conversation, even from urban areas like ours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you have the large planets. Can still get great. Planets are so bright that, the limiting factor will mostly just be your atmospheric seeing, how disturbed the air is above you, which, still might not be as good in a city because there's a lot of asphalt or hot buildings, and as that's cooling at night, lead to sort of air currents. But still, the light pollution will not be limiting factors. So, you can take out a telescope like this in the heart of New York City or San Francisco or LA, and you can still get amazing views of Jupiter and Saturn, Mars. If your telescope is large enough, you can resolve that pretty well. And, you can try and make out some extended objects. I've seen Andromeda and some, globular clusters with this from, the middle of San Francisco. They just look, pretty blobular. You can't really make out too much structure.
And people shouldn't really expect, as you say later in the course, if you've never looked through a telescope and you think that you're going to see the kinds of, the quality of images that come from the James Webb Space Telescope or the Hubble, or even a large telescope that has been doing astrophotography on Earth. Some of these are very, very long exposures. You can't really expect that, can you? I mean, if you look at relatively bright objects like the Orion Nebula.
Right. Yeah. Something has to be quite bright for the human eye to be able to make out color in it. And so, maybe if you're somewhere very dark, you have a very large telescope, you'll be able to get, what we would definitely call fantastic views. But if your standard is the James Webb Space Telescope or the Hubble Space Telescope, nothing's going to live up to that. I mean, those don't have an atmosphere to contend with, and yeah, they can just point at something and collect photons for an hour, whereas your eye has an instant. So unfortunately, I would love to maybe in the future get like a bionic eye or something that could just have exposure times, but as it stands, yeah. Yeah, that's also something that I always do when I'm taking people out to use telescope. Is if they've never looked through them before, set expectations. This is not going to be the Sombrero Galaxy or the Horsehead Nebula, that images that you've seen from Hubble, but it will still just still knock your socks off. If nothing else, just for, like you were saying, that immediacy. There's nothing that can replace that. The Hubble Space Telescope or JWST can take beautiful images and then you can see them on your screen, but you're not actually looking at that galaxy right then. You're looking at your screen, and so to just know that it's right there, it's where you're looking, it's right in front of you and you can see it, just like anything on our planet. It completely breaks down the sort of spatial relationship that we think of with space. Space isn't out there somewhere when we're down here. We're just both around. We're in the same place and it's everywhere.
Yeah, very well said. And just because it's newsworthy, did you see that beautiful new image of the Sombrero Galaxy that just got published from the JWST, compared with a more visible light one from the Hubble? God, just gorgeous. Showed those to my grandson today, and he was pretty thrilled.
You got a lucky grandson.
I hope he feels that way. Somebody, and I hope I didn't just lose it here. Oh, here it is. And it happens to be from Rhiannon again. You're popping up all over here, Rhiannon. She says, I meant to ask, does anyone have any tips on how to hone in on something if your telescope doesn't have a proper viewfinder or finder scope? And that's not something that came up in the course. There are, of course, telescopes, even inexpensive ones, that have those little sub-telescopes for finding things. But a lot of them now just have those little LED light points, right? Which are not terribly expensive, and you can get them for telescopes. I mean, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, this telescope, excuse me, this telescope came with a cheap red dot finder, probably cost, $10-15. And that you can adjust, just point your telescope at the moon by eye and then match up the red dot so that it is lined up. So yeah, I mean, Rhiannon, if your telescope has a slot where it can take a finder scope, then yeah, I think it's definitely worth getting, because it is so hard to use a telescope without a finder, unless, even if it's a go-to like this, it's hard, because you still have to calibrate probably, but alternatives to finder scopes. I don't know, Matt, do you know any good alternatives if you just don't want to use one at all?
No, I mean, because what you said, even a good go-to telescope that has that database and orients itself with GPS and knows what time it is, they still are going to be a little bit off. Most of the ones in my experience, I guess they've gotten much, much better, but it's still important to have a little finder scope, because they have, it's just much easier to find things and center them with that than in your telescope. Even looking at the sun, I mean, I'm not saying that you should look through anything, finder scope or otherwise, if you're looking at the sun, but boy, it can be, you'd think, boy, big sun is hard to get centered in your telescope. I've had a devil of a time when the sun filter is on the end of my telescope. And the only thing you're going to see is the sun. It's tough to align something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you have like a 20-degree field of view or something crazy, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Here's a comment from Jay. He says, my astronomy club, the National Capital Astronomers, has had public observing in DC for 76 years, and we can still see nebula, globular clusters, as well as planets and the moon, even the occasional comet. Good on you, Jay, and also for being part of a club that shares these things. As we said, so much of this course is about preparing people to be able to share what they see. And you even have these sections in some of the, or is it all of the sections of the course, the scenarios where you go through some of the questions that people ask, and those are exactly the kinds of questions that I've been asked when I have a telescope out in public. And so thank you for that. It's a great service, but you've obviously been asked the same questions.
Yeah, or I've asked them myself, back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that probably the one that I get most is, the one I get most is, do you think there's life out there? I think that's
is what I missed that. Sorry, is what?
Do you think there's life out there?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And
Would
the
you say
answer
that's
is
also oh, it's right here. No. Is that the one that you also get the most?
Yeah, maybe what I get the most is how much do you have to spend to get a telescope, which you do talk about in
That's number
one
2.
of the scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good question because it's a hard
is.
one to answer, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, for those who are out there, wondering whether you should get a telescope, I would say, I mean, yeah, it's worth it, definitely. But also, it depends on your budget. And, binoculars are a good place to start if you don't want to splurge on a telescope. But also, telescopes have gotten a lot cheaper over time. And so, you can get something pretty good for, only $150, which is, in this day and age with inflation, not so bad. And then, if you're willing to spend a few hundred, you can get something quite decent. But it all depends on where you are, how dark are your skies. Do you want to be looking at planets or something else? What are you trying to do? If I, lived out in the middle of Kansas, I would have dropped, $500, $600 on a 12-inch Dobsonian. Well, maybe not 12-inch. I couldn't get that, but 8-inch Dobsonian. And had a heck of a time.
Stretch it a little bit. Get the 12-inch.
But yeah, I mean, like I wanted mobility, so I went with this. But also, there's, telescope purchasing is a complicated thing. You have to think about cool down time and, the tripod. There's a huge separate thing. Do you want a refractor? Do you want a Schmidt crash screen? Do you want a Makutov cast screen? There's almost it seems like you almost need a PhD just to be able to purchase a telescope in the first place and know what you're doing beforehand. So I'll actually say one of the first of all, I feel bad for all of the people who get telescopes as gifts in the coming months. If anyone here is planning buying a telescope for a loved one, friends or family. I commend you because that research is hard, and you don't want to get them something that has like a tiny aperture. Get something that's at least 3 or 4 inches if you can. It doesn't really matter what the shape is, as long as it's 3 or 4 inches. You should be able to at least see Saturn or Jupiter, something like that. But yeah, we're going to. I was talking with Amber and Merck earlier, and one of the videos we're planning on doing on social media is shortly after the holidays. We'll have something where I host a video saying like, so you got a telescope for Christmas or whatever, and you have no idea how to use it. Like, here's the 101 or whatever, because I think a lot of people end up being in that position.
Absolutely, that's excellent. I'll watch that. I also, one of the other questions that I get a lot when I take a telescope out is, okay, how many power is this? And then you have to explain it's not like a microscope where it's all about magnification. So, and you cover this in the course as well. At least you mention it.
Yeah, I wish it was. It's pretty humbling when you're like, oh, I have these amazing eyepieces, which is a whole other thing. Is when you're researching telescopes,
Yeah.
is that you think you're done, and then you're like, oh no, I also have to know all the eyepieces, and there's a billion different kinds. But you think that you can strap on the ultra 300 times zoomachrome fancy eyepiece. But it just looks like a shaky blob, and that it looks so much clearer if you're willing to just take a step back and collect more photons.
So aperture, I mean, you said it already. Just the bigger the aperture, the more light you're going to get focused down onto your eye. That's the whole idea of why we wanted to get a gigantic mirror up into space, and we had to fold it up inside a rocket. It was just to get a big mirror, because the more photons you gather, the better off you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is part of why it'll be very exciting when you have something like Starship that can take a giant telescope up much more easily. Hopefully, our telescopes get bigger and cheaper, and greater in number.
I think I read that, yeah, you could have taken up the JWST mirror without having to fold it up and
Exactly.
make it out of segments, which, my God, that would have been a lot easier. You had one of your guidelines, you were talking about using a laser pointer, which is a great thing to do. But I think it's important to mention that, yeah, most of the laser pointers out there are relatively dim. You still don't want to point it at your eye, but red laser pointers, whereas a good green laser pointer, which doesn't cost much more, a few $5-10 extra, really stands out in most skies when you shine them up there. And they're great tools, right, for pointing things out without looking through the telescope.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're trying to host other people around your telescope, green laser pointers almost as much of a must-have as red lights to spare your night vision.
Say something about binoculars, because a lot of people do already have, like, their parents or their grandparents' old binoculars somewhere in a closet, and they may not have or want or be able to afford a telescope. And you do talk a lot about the good stuff you can do with just binoculars.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you can do with just binoculars, and they're cheaper and more accessible. You might just have them around already, like you said. So a planet like Jupiter, Saturn, you're not going to be able to, those features like rings or the greater spot aren't going to pop out of a binocular probably. But they'll still allow you to see them in some detail, and you'll be able to see things like asterisms if you're in a sky that's dark enough, patterns and stars that are beautiful and interesting. You might be able to split some binaries, resolve separate stars in binary systems, and maybe see some diffuse sky objects, like globular clusters or nebula that kind of just look like blobs maybe, but are still there and beautiful and super cool to be able to witness firsthand. And also the sort of one of the silver linings of binoculars is that though, you should ideally still have a tripod, because gosh, it's hard to just hold them up for a long period of time. It's a lot more natural for a lot of people, especially starting out, to look through something with both eyes. A lot of people at first, struggle to, maybe they're squinting for their entire time stargazing through a telescope, or they're, just putting a hand over their eye. A lot of veteran stargazers use eye patches, just so that they don't have to, you don't want to strain your eyes for that long, strain your face. And binoculars, really help with that. Though also, I should mention, you can get, bino viewers for telescopes, though it kind of depends on your exact telescope, which are a good solution for people who don't want to, look like a pirate or anything. So I don't know why they wouldn't.
Exactly. That was such a good point that you made in the course that I made a note of it, because I was in my 20s and had a telescope for ages before I learned, oh no, try to keep both eyes open, even if you're wearing an eye patch or just covering the other one, because it will help you to see through the one that's trying to see through the eyepiece. The other one there was about keeping your glasses on if you have astigmatism, which I do. That you can just with focusing adjust for nearsightedness or farsightedness, but not astigmatism. But if you keep your glasses on, it brings up something that you mentioned in the course called eye relief. And if you could just say a word or two about that, because it's really important.
Right. Yes. So there's, well, sorry, before we go on to that, I want to mention someone commented something that I think is worth bringing up.
Sure.
Lewis or Louis, sorry, I don't know. How to
Oh,
pronounce your
I
name,
saw that
Rifkin,
one. Yeah.
Yeah. Mentioned that you can't always use a green laser pointer in the sky because of certain regulations. And that's an excellent point. Not only can lasers be potentially dangerous, you should never point them at anyone or anything that might have a person in it, but you should not use them if you're near an airport or a place where there might be people operating machinery, especially in the sky where you're pointing the laser. And there are laws against that. You definitely don't want to be blinding any pilots. So anyway,
And
sorry.
you do mention that in the course as well. So
Yes, we do.
It's an important point. But back to eye relief.
Right. So eye relief refers to the aspect of an eyepiece that is essentially the separation of the lens that you're looking through and where your eye would be. So if that is very small, then it's going to be pretty hard to fit your eyeball and your glasses up against that eyepiece and still be able to make out what's the object that's being shown through the telescope. But if you have long eye relief, that's a lot easier. So something to keep in mind when you're shopping for eyepieces or even telescopes, if you have astigmatism and know you're going to want to keep your glasses on. For me personally, also another important thing to keep in mind is whether you're doing this viewing with other people or not. So when I'm showing other people an object through the telescope and they have great vision, which jealousy, but if they have great vision, then I'm going to try and keep my glasses on more so we don't have to skew the focus knob back and forth every time. But if it's just me observing and I have kind of minor astigmatism, then I'll just put the focus on. Oh, excuse me. And go with it that way.
There's another trick that you mentioned when letting small children look through the telescope, and I can't wait to try this next time I'm out with a scope with the toilet paper tube. And what's the advantage there?
It's so for very young children, they might not understand that you're not supposed to look at the eyepiece. You're looking through it. And if you hold up a toilet paper roll or paper towel roll, just some sort of tube like that in front of the eyepiece, well, first of all, it gives them something to grab, which is great instead of the telescope. But then also just helps them naturally look down through the eyepiece instead of at it. But yeah, it's also another thing which I personally, I still have to get something like this. But oh man, if you have like a step ladder or something with handles on it, being able to tell people as they come up, put your hands here and here, then it automatically gives them a place to put their hands instead of the telescope, which otherwise, I hate to have whenever someone comes up to my telescope, I hate to start with a negation. I hate to start by saying like, don't touch the telescope, watch out, because then they're hesitant. They feel like they're sort of trespassing in some way. But if I can say, put your hands here and here and here and there, then I'm enabling them. I'm giving them instructions to do a thing, but then they're not going to, shove the telescope off of Saturn or whatever it is.
I've been there. There's another great piece of advice that has to do with the questions that you inevitably get from folks. And that's being willing, if you don't know something, to say, gee, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to be gatekeeping or whatever. You don't want to be too proud, right? We're all learning. I'm happy to admit that, a lot of the stuff in that course, I learned for the first time as researching that course. And it was a lot of fun. It's part of why I like this job. And that, many of the people in this community, perhaps the majority of them, had seen, Saturn's rings or, seen things through a telescope well, before I did, just in terms of age alone. And yeah, I feel like it's coming from academia, something that we call imposter syndrome, right?
Yes.
Just that, no matter how much of an expert you truly are in something, you still feel like you don't actually belong, like you're not an expert. And, that's in part because of the culture there, but that's not the culture here, right? And that should be the culture among stargazers, among, space lovers and space nerds and the space curious. So, we're all here to share what we love, and also I say in that opinion piece that you quoted earlier, whatever you don't know is just if humanity knows it and you can look it up, then great, you learn something new and that's fun. And then if no one knows it, even better,
Yes.
because then you have something to wonder about, and that's incredible.
That sounds like a very good line to end with. But I'm not sure. I mean, we've already gone well beyond the hour that I told you we would probably go for, Asa. It has been delightful, even though I haven't been able to spend too much time looking at it, to see the great discussion that has been underway among our members. David says, I've seen nebula clusters in some galaxies with his binoculars at Bortle 4, which is very impressive, David.
Yeah.
Good on you there. Um, I just gotta say again how great the course is. The resources, the images that you were able to include. I mean, there's just a jaw-dropping animation from Gaia Sky, which is
yeah,
just
I love that.
amazing. In fact, I'm going to look for the link, and because I have it here, and I will drop that into the chat as well. And if you're hearing me say this stuff all the time about dropping things into the chat, whoops, sorry here. I'm going to try that again. And you're wondering where the chat is. Well, again, folks, if you're watching this and you're not a member of the Planetary Society, so you're seeing it after the fact because we're presenting it live in our member community, we invite you to become a member and be able to enjoy things like the Stargazing 101 course that is hosted by our guest, Asa Stahl, the science editor for the Planetary Society. And we have so much more waiting for you. And that's not even talking about how we are advocates for exploring the cosmos, for knowing the cosmos and our place within it, as our vision statement says. I've just posted the Gaia Sky link. Just say a word about Gaia Sky and these kinds of resources that are out there, many of which you link to from the course.
Yeah. So, I mean, Gaia is this European Space Agency space observatory, that is essentially compiling this gigantic celestial atlas of billions of stars and galaxies and other objects. And then from this precise data on these stars' locations and how they're moving through space, you could just have this map of our neighborhood, of where we live and what it's full of, and then you can explore it. That can all be visualized. And so Gaia Sky, is a tool for that. And there's also, you can look up videos published by Gaia on YouTube and see, perspectives of flying through the Milky Way, or how the Milky Way's stars are all moving right now, how the constellations are going to be shifting in the next tens of thousands of years, and how groups of stars are born together and then gradually drift apart, and how we're seeing that in action as well. How these kind of weave in and out of the galaxies as they rotate or orbit the galactic core. I mean, I could just kind of sit and watch space visualizations with like new data all day. So yeah, I part of me kind of wants to, maybe that's a future course, is just a list of amazing links to cool videos that I love to watch.
Here's a comment from Michael. This was great. I needed this right now. I can't wait to dig into the class and share with some curious people in my life. He says, thank you both. Thank you, Michael. And Asa, thank you for joining us here to talk about Stargazing 101 and what brought you deeper into the cosmos as well. I am absolutely delighted and very proud to have you as a colleague at the Planetary Society. So great to have you on board, and thank you for everything you're doing.
No, thank you. I'm grateful to be here. It's been lovely talking to everyone. I'm so glad to be a part of this community and to have found it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next course already.
Asa Stahl, Dr. Asa Stahl, astrophysicist, science communicator extraordinaire, is our science editor at the Planetary Society. You can see his work all over planetary.org and pretty much everything else we do, including our social media channels. And very much so, if you're a member in the member community, which is where this is being presented live right now, if you want to learn more, planetary.org/join. If you join us, you are just in time to help us celebrate our 45th anniversary. And I said up front, I've never worn a t-shirt for a live event before, but because I already had it on, this is our 20th anniversary logo that you see right here. The 45th anniversary logo is in development right now. You can help us mark this milestone for the Planetary Society and help us in everything we do, which is in part, keeping people like Asa busy sharing the wonder. I'll be back. Our next live event, December 5, next week, Thursday. It's this book, Reentry, by the great space journalist Eric Berger. Some of you have already read it. I've been hearing from a lot of you who were thought, oh God, it's just another We Worship Elon Musk book. No, it's not. Have you looked at it, Asa?
No, but I'm a longtime fan of Eric Berger. He's excellent.
Yeah.
I actually organized a science communication conference, mostly for graduate students, back when I was at Rice. And I purposefully sought him out and invited him to be one of our speakers because, yeah, he's fantastic. So yeah, looking forward to that discussion.
Me too. And he has been making the rounds because the book is quite popular in our community and beyond. And it's really the story of the development of the Falcon 9. It kind of picks up with the development of the Falcon 9 and takes us almost to the present. It is absolutely beautifully written book, and he was a real insider. And I cannot wait to talk to Eric about his views regarding Elon and Elon's relationship to SpaceX in light of what we have seen in the last few months, basically since the book came out. So that's the evening of December 5. And for the rest of you, that one as well will be available on our website at planetary.org/live and on our YouTube channel very soon after the live event on the evening of December 5. Once again, Asa, thanks very much. Keep up the great work.
Thanks. You too.
And everybody else, thank you for joining us. Have a great evening. Those of you who are here in the U.S., have a very happy Thanksgiving. And everybody else, you too, whatever you're thankful for. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.